Hey, everybody, welcome to the fantastic session of Blackfest Tech. We are here today. We're going to be talking about the power of community, and I have some fantastic women with me today. But before I do that, I probably should introduce myself. My name is Flavia Lafongang, and I'm the founder of Three Colors World, a creative branding and marketing agency specialized in technology. I'm also the founder of TLA Black Women in Tech, which has over 800 members. Please, I invite you to join. And I also run a podcast called Tech Brands Talk. But it's not so much about me today. We're going to talk about the power of community. And I have some fabulous women with me. And we're going to start with Erica Batista. Erica, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Let me introduce you. She's a GM on deck in Europe. Before that, she was a founding team member and director of the European Accelerator, The Family. She's Afro-Latina, oh la la, and born and raised in the Dominican Republic. And I've been living in Paris for 8 years. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Hola.
Yes, and if it's something that you don't know about her, she loves reading tarot cards and uses them as a tool for introspection. Interesting. I love that. I have Winnie Akajo. Hello, Winnie. How are you? Winnie is a community manager at Founders Factory, responsible for managing a network of entrepreneurs interested in building tech startups across eight sectors. Before, she worked in business development across various early stage startups such as Trustpilot that we know, Zipcar and Groupon. And I'm sure a lot of us has already bought stuff on Groupon, and I blame you for that.
Not me,
And also, she has a 13, if you don't know about her, she has a 13-year-old son, Black John Clark, remember that, and hosts a podcast sharing the authentic stories of sassy single mothers. So you can listen to that, which is called Sassy Single Moms. And then last but not least, Deborah Okenla. She's the CEO of YSYS. If you haven't heard about that organization, where have you been doing? Excuse me. An organization providing employment and entrepreneurship opportunities for diverse talent in technology. She has been named Computer Weekly Rising Woman in Tech this year, 2020, but also in 2019 and 2018. Wow. Listed as the UK top 100 Black and minority ethnic leaders in technology by the Financial Times. Deborah sits on the advisory board for and Digital Coders of Color Novator Innovation Fellowship Program. My God, that woman. How are you? How are you, Deborah?
I'm good, thank you so much.
Good. Well, I'm so glad to have you all here because we're going to be talking about some very interesting topic, which is obviously the power of community. We've all built interesting or part of interesting network and community. And I think it's extremely relevant right now, but I'm curious in terms of why do you believe, the power of community is so relevant right now? I'm going to start with Deborah in terms of your point of view. Why do you think it's so important and why should pay more attention?
I think the community has always been something that's been so important. Everywhere we look, we are all part of the community, whether that's our immediate friends, our family, our neighborhood, our workplace. But with all the tragic events that happened this year, from the murder of George Floyd that we all witnessed on TV to a global pandemic, more than ever being connected to our friends and our allies will really help us move from a position of strength, resilience, hope, and joy. And so being part of a community right now, I think is the only way that we're going to get through 2020. How we do community is not something that necessarily can be prescriptive. People do community in all different forms. So whether you're part of WhatsApp groups, you're part of platforms, you go to a religious center or part of religious community groups, you can do community in all different forms, right? And so that's what's super exciting.
Yes, I think it's a great answer. And I think nowadays we've always wanted to be part of the tribe. And I think more than ever, it has become much more relevant. What are your views on that, Winnie?
I think it's a really great way for you to bring together people who have the same opinions, and I think whether you're a startup, a content creator, or a marketing team, ultimately a community is a really good way for you to encourage peer-to-peer interaction. And then through that, you're able to obviously build meaningful relationships, whether it's your users, brand advocates, or talent individuals. So for me, in this day and age, I think it's really powerful in terms of how, businesses potentially can use it to serve their needs, but as well as that also matchmake individuals and help them pursue whatever it is that they want to do.
Yes, absolutely. What about you, Erica? What do you think?
So difficult to add with all the great points that are made by my fellow speakers, but I think that the power of community is twofold. At the individual level, we are social animals, so we have literally evolved to survive as a group. So that is kind of a deep need that we have as humans. And on the second, the more collective level, I like this quote by this American anthropologist called Margaret Mead. She says that never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world because it's the only thing that ever has. So, to comment on what Deborah was saying before, it's this year it has come to light how much we must all come together in order to achieve our goals, because together we are stronger. So that's, to me, that's the power of community.
100%, 100%. And I think obviously Black Lives Matter has been probably one of the biggest society issues that a lot of companies have figured that obviously it's relevant and have tapped into it, but not necessarily have done it the right way. And I know for me, from me creating the Black Women in Tech Network, I was born out of the frustration. I worked in a number of industries, and when I've entered the world of technology, I could not believe that there's no way I could be the only one in the room again. And I'm so glad that I found so many amazing women. But think about, the reason why, or the communities you're involved in. What was the frustration? Maybe I'll start with you, Erica, for building a community or any community you've been part of.
What are the what?
The frustration. When you think about the frustration, things that you wanted to change. For me, for example, when I started, Black Women in Tech Network, I wanted to change how things are being done. I wanted to really share the light or put the light on Black women and what they were doing. So what is, look at the community you've been involved in. What was the frustration that you're trying to solve?
Oh, that's a great way to frame communities. I never thought about it that way, but that is so true that communities, the intention is always to fight something. There's always like something that needs to change. So for example, what you were just sharing right now, it reminded me of when I was younger and I was still in the Dominican Republic. I know I still look very young, but when I was very young, I used to straighten my hair just because of, in my country, it was not considered formal enough or serious enough to have, my natural curls. And even in my high school, I had to, braid my hair while the other straight girls who just come naturally to school. And so a friend of mine created a movement that was for women to have their natural hair out and to do a big cut and then stop straightening their hair. So that community allowed me to embrace that part of my identity. When we started the family, the goal with that accelerator was to encourage people to be ambitious and to allow people to kind of, dream big and tackle those really big societal problems. So I totally agree with that point of view, and I've had many frustrations in my life, and it is through the power of community that we can overcome that.
100%. What about you, Deborah?
In terms of the frustrations?
Yes.
Yeah, big question. I think with YSYS, it's always a catch-22 because there's frustrations and then there's like opportunities, right? And I think with YSYS, definitely when we came together as a community, it was around how do we just find people that are like-minded, that care about a mission and something so much bigger than ourselves, and just bringing people on that kind of shared understanding. And so that's essentially how we started. It was just like, I'm interested in this particular thing. I want to see people and be connected to people that have like-minded interests, and then how can we convene together? And that's how we started our first community. With our advocates and our allies who campaign with us against policies that really exclude people that look like us on the call, that came from a frustration, right?
Yes.
So it was everything, all the stats, and I'm not going to bore everyone with all the stats because we know the numbers. Diversity brings returns. There's lack of funding for Black women. If you don't know these stats by now, literally, where have you been? And with that community, we brought individuals that were frustrated by this, but really understanding that diversity is way more than just having good intentions, right? You might say, yeah, I want to be a good person, I want to serve the world. What are you doing about it? And so when we brought this community together, these are individuals that want to make change, they want to action, they want to do stuff, they want to get out and like put out a hashtag, whether you're protesting or you're advocating in a digital world, whether you're using memes or GIFs, or Instagram to protest, that's amazing. Or whether you're out there writing policies or creating startups that are inclusive, designed in an inclusive way, that's essentially it.
100%. I love this answer. Great answer again. I'm going to ask you a different question for you, Winnie. Think about more in terms of a lesson. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn while building a community. What do you think there are?
I think some of the lessons that I've learned throughout my time working at Founders Factory, I think the biggest one is definitely being comfortable with the fact that not everyone is right for your community. So I think you definitely have to make an active decision to be deliberate about your community and the culture that you wish to kind of ingrain within the community, and constantly putting yourself in the individual shoes, and thinking to yourself, am I a proud member of this community? If I was in this community, would I be getting the most value, and would my time be used in the right way? So I think these are lessons that I've definitely had to learn, and I've had to come up with new strategies as a way to make sure that when I am asking myself these questions, I'm confident that the individual on the other hand is also having a similar answer or the same experience.
Yes, and I think it's important that we look at community, or people think about community and they don't think about it as a way you build a business. And behind a business, there's also an understanding about community. And I think nowadays, with the power of social media, look at your customers not just as customers, but what exactly are you trying to change, and really understand that it's beyond just buying your product. When somebody wear a pair of Nike or whatever it is, what does it represent? Some of the brands that really understand, tapping into this community, but also these ambassadors to do more than that. And I love what you say. It's great. Looking at Erica, I want to ask you a different question related to really the most effective way. People say, okay, I want to build my community. I have something that I think I really like, and I'm inspired by you ladies. You seem like you know exactly what to do. Erica, what would you tell them in terms of successfully the phases of building a successful community? How to do it right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the best way to start a community today is to, I have like a couple of advice. Basically, start small. So the phases of the communities, you start very small, you start with a clear intention, you have a small group of people who are super excited, and then you have the second phase, which is kind of that awkward phase where people who were there in the beginning start dropping off because they weren't really into it, they just really liked you as a person and they wanted to support you. But then you don't have that momentum yet. And that's where consistency pays off. When you look at a community and you feel like that was an overnight success, that is rarely the case. It's just by being consistent, iterating, and being intentional in what you do and how you set up your community. And as Winnie was saying, that's something that Priya Parker talks about in her book. I forget the name, The Art of Gathering. She talks about generous exclusion. So be intentional about who's not, invited to the party. And then you start to see some success.
Yes, I love that. It's funny because I wanted to share as well my own personal story. When I started Black Women in Tech last year in September, it was really nice, and I got a lot of support, and I was brilliant, and really just started as an agency. I'm going to see what I have my full business. I'd really, I want to do something else, which is beyond just, helping technology companies. And again, something like I started just focusing on building the community. Now I'm on the second phase of my growth of these communities, to really just know how can we go out there to really stimulate young girls to think about starting, their career in technology. It's interesting what you said. I really like that as well. Is that, sometimes, again, starting small and being very specific in terms of who do you want to have and who you don't want to have, because people have to be on the same page together. What about you? I'm probably going to ask as well, Deborah, what do you think about when it comes to building, the right faces to build a community? What have you done in the strategy that you put in place?
I'm a big fan of Ella Baker. She's one of the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement. And she always says that strong people don't need strong leaders. She's like, if you can encourage individuals to have this kind of sense of shared ownership and shared agency over their community, they will ensure that the community continues to thrive. And I think that's super powerful. And I always have this saying that often when you have a community manager, you have one point of success and one point of failure. Because if that community manager is no longer around, or that strong leader decides they're going to take annual leave, they're going to go to Turkey, they're going to get married, they're unwell, what happens to the community? Who's looking after the community? And so it's actually really encouraging everyone to feel like a community manager and have the agency of where the community is going. But also what that helps is then it helps internally vet good and bad behavior. And so you don't necessarily have someone saying, oh my gosh, you done this and this was so disrespectful to someone else, but actually the community comes together because there's some shared values to say, actually, this is not something we as a collective advocate for. Or sometimes if you've got that really powerful community, that individual that decides that actually, there's been some bad behavior, because of the values, might step back. And I think that's powerful when we're able to check our biases and check when we're not being essentially a community person all the time. So I think that's super powerful. But also, again, I think other models and frameworks that really work around building communities again, is around the snowflake model, which I know Obama used heavily in his campaign. It's around, really creating these individuals that can go out and create micro communities and then come back to then the sole community's purpose. And I think that's super powerful. So if anyone's thinking about building a community right now and you want to have a massive platform, you can set up like 10 different WhatsApp groups, 10 different threads, and have all these micro and sub conversations and people coming together, but then bringing them back to a center, right? And this shared mission and value. And I think
that is so true. Yeah, we don't need to have a lot of budget to start a community. You can just start, isn't it? It's about leaders creating leaders and allow people to take ownership. What do you think, Winnie, based on that question?
I think the only thing I'd have to add, I completely agree with everything Erica and Deborah have just said. I think ultimately the final part would be just like tracking the effectiveness of the community. So once you've built these, you've built these ways for people to engage with each other and you facilitated them with a platform, how do you then know it's working? So I think that's a really important phase of the community aspect, consistently, speaking to the members and making sure that, they're happy. It's almost like a human NPS score, like, is it working? Are we delivering? Is this what you expected? So I think that's the last and final phase that I'd like to include, other than what Deborah and Erica already mentioned.
I like that. I'm going to ask another question again, Winnie, which is much more related to some people listening to this right now. What advice would you give them to, I think we share a lot of things about, leaders should create leaders. Again, something to understand the power of culture. And culture, what is culture? It's about how you treat people. And that's super important. Allow them to take ownership. At the end of the day, if you've created something, people should really see the vision and what you're trying to create. And again, I love that you talk about, for me in marketing, we talk about KPI, which is key performance indicators, which is about measuring the success. Like if people are satisfied, is qualitative or quantitative? Are they engaged with you on social media? Are they actually part of it? Are they sharing the word about what you do? It's so important. Is there anything else, any advice would you give to someone who's trying to create a community? We talked about starting small. Is there anything else?
I'd say lay the foundation. So just lay the best practices. What is the one thing that you want to do all the time? Whether it's a newsletter, whether it's a monthly social, whether it's a WhatsApp group, as Deborah mentioned, what are the foundations of your community? What is the one thing that people can trust that you'll deliver on, and then build from that?
Great. Erica, what would you add to that before we finish?
Yeah, so very briefly, I will say that, a lot of people start with the end result. Like, for example, how do we get more people to talk about us online? How do we get people to buy the product? And I think that it's not really helpful to reason that way. It's more helpful to start, as Winnie said, to lay the foundation. For example, at On Deck, if you look at Twitter, you look up the On Deck program, you'll see tons of people tweeting about it. We've never asked anybody to share on Twitter what they think of us or to spread the word. We don't do that, but we do take people who, like, one of the criteria that we take into account to accept somebody in our fellowship is, do they have the spirit of service? And another thing that we implement a lot is gratitude. And so when you put people like that together, it is only natural that that is going to be the outcome of that community, if that makes sense. So I think that laying the foundation and the intention of your community is key in the outcome that you want.
I love that. Deborah, one last word.
I think that's so powerful, Erica. I know one of our members, Jeeves, has just joined On Deck, and he speaks so highly of yourself and the work you're doing. So 100% great advice. That I know it's working. I think just also, if you're building a community as a community organizer, just to look after your well-being is so important, because you're going to be so connected to so many individuals, different kind of spirits and people's personalities, if you believe in the energy and stuff. And sometimes it can feel like a lot. So if you need to check into therapy, that's cool. Therapy, can we make therapy cool?
Yes, it is cool.
Yes.
Right.
Make therapy
do your Pilates, have 6 people in your house, if you're only allowed 6 at the moment, and do the things that are gonna keep you centered, keep you energized, so that when you feel good, right, your community is gonna feel good. And so understanding that it's okay to take time out and look after yourself to come back and serve the community.
Can I say thank you so much to Erica, thank you so much to Winnie, thank you so much to Deborah for giving me some of your time. I really appreciate it, and you've shared some amazing advice. People out there, and community is much more important. Understand the power of what it means, especially for the new world that we're building, and we need this now more than ever. Thank you so much, everybody. I think it's a wrap.
Thank you. I think we killed it.
Yes.